should now see a whole screen all about Parish Online.
Yep.
And just a little notice for everyone. I record the sessions because particularly the early sessions, we go through a lot of slides very quickly. And so sometimes it helps to be able to have the recording later to go through it in slower time and see if there's something that you've been puzzling over. So you will get a copy of the presentation and a copy of the recording sent to you after the session. By all means, interrupt at any stage because there's only the two of us and we can spend time on any questions that you happen to have. So what we're covering today is the licenses you need to get the full use out of the system. These are sort of external licenses to the Parish Online license itself, how the system works and what it can do, introducing you to the idea of mapping layers, and then we get into the fun bit where you're doing it. And that's quite a long session. It's a major chunk of the session is you doing it. And then I just follow up with a couple of items else that you can do with it. And then we'll go into Q&A should we need it. So the first licensing thing is the public sector geospatial agreement. Everybody who's a council has access to this for free, but you do need to register if no one's done it so far. And the difference it gives is that on the right-hand side here, you have a little map in some sort of detail, which is basically the open source mapping, the open map that the Ordnance Survey produces, or you can go to this, which is a much better level of detail if you get your PSGA license. So if you haven't got it already, this is how you get it. And we do exactly the same thing for the aerial photography. The license is built into the PSGA. And again, it takes you from the sort of the level of detail that you have here to the data there. And I just mentioned in passing that you can see the shadows here. And shadows are very helpful if you happen to be a council that has to look after street lights and so forth. And your first thing you see is, well, where are all our street lamps? And the best way of finding them is with the shadows from the overhead photography. So when you get into your map, the opening screen from dearie me, Parish Online, you have in the top right-hand corner a little cogwheel up here. And that's where we find the PSGA number. So you click on the cogwheel, you'll get a mini menu. You can go into help and support. And then that takes you to the support center for Parish Online and XMAP, which is its big brother. And you just type in PSGA and it goes through the steps of what you have to do. It's very quick. The website you go to says it may take up to 5 days. My experience is it takes about 5 minutes for it to arrive in the mail for you, the email. So it's very quick. And you both may find you've already got a PSGA number assigned to your Parish Online if you've been playing around with it before, because the first thing it does when it starts up is ask you for the PSGA number. So let's go in now to how it works and what it can do. And basically, it's based on the Ordnance Survey's map of the United Kingdom, the digital map. It doesn't involve any installation of software from your end. It's all browser access to the cloud. And the cloud is pretty secure and your access to it is encrypted. So the information that you're putting into the system is, first of all, visible only to people with your particular license. So anybody in your council can see what you've done, but nobody else elsewhere can see what you've done. The information is very personal to you or your council. So lots of ways of getting help and finding out how to do things. I'm sort of the right-hand end, the training partner. And there's all the other systems. We'll touch on the knowledge base today because it's very useful, and we'll touch on the user group at the end because I think that's the most useful part. You've got lots of other people around who are using this who would be delighted to help you out. Okay, so what do you actually get? So the reason for using maps in the first place is that everything has a place, and I call digital mapping location-based data. So the idea is that wherever you see something, you should be able to click on it and up will come the data on the left-hand side. And basically that's how the system works. Again, you'll be seeing that later. But everything has a place, and then to find out what the information is on something, you just click on it. So neighborhood plans, I was talking with Richard earlier that that's usually the reason that people get Parish Online in the first place, but it does have all these other issues, particularly helpful for contracts management. If you've got people cutting your grass or looking after the trees and so forth, very useful indeed for asset management. If you are again responsible for the trees that line the road and the tree falls down and hurts somebody, it'd be very helpful to have a management system that shows that you've A, got the tree listed, B, you've got a maintenance program for it, and C, you can show when it was last inspected, so that it's basically a great way of showing good governance. So I like to think of, I'm helping people move paper out of the filing cabinet into an online system where it can be accessed by everybody. So if you've ever run into the trouble where you desperately need some important information from the filing cabinet, you discover the parish clerk's gone off to Mallorca with the key in her pocket, this system prevents that. So having it all online 24/7 is a big improvement, I think, and very much easier to start producing reports once all the data is stored online. So lets you do all your own things. There's masses and masses of information coming from third parties, which we'll go into in a second, but this also lets you do all your own things as well, locally to your council. All sorts of ways of getting information out of the system. You can print it, you can distribute it by email, you can send people URLs, very helpful. So the digital map from the Ordnance Survey is the underlying basis of the map. And that just shows you everything that you will normally find on a map. But then you layer over on top of it whatever the product is that you're interested in at the time. And these layers, and there are literally hundreds of them built into Parish Online, but they all come from different authorities. So many of them are government, many of them are private, and then you've got the ones sort of somewhere in between the two of them. And if you are lucky enough to have a cooperative local authority like your district council, your county council, or your unitary, then there's tons of information that they've got that they can export to you on Parish Online. And again, we'll go into all that. So case studies are wonderful because plenty of people have done what you're trying to do ahead of you. And they've all come up with case studies, which you can find on the Parish Online website, rather cunningly hidden in a tab called Case Studies. And they're fabulous because they give you a step-by-step route to the way they got to where you want to go. So it's mostly been done for you in advance. And these are really helpful. So you've got all sorts of examples of how people are using this. Here's one that just shows what you can do for your own local council. So here's the basic Ordnance Survey map of an area. And then you say, well, actually, we want to talk about where we're going to keep as green as possible, the gap between the other areas and our plans. Then you can say, and these are the areas that we're going to do more green spaces. And then you can say, well, actually, now we want to do some development in the brown patches. And finally, you can say, we need to look after people's skylines and their visibility, what they're allowed to see. You don't want to interrupt, so you can do those on the map as well. So basically, you can do nearly anything that you need to show people how and where things will be, what they'll look like. It can all be done in Parish Online. So here you've got the asset management. Chelsea obviously is a seaside place. They've got all of these benches, the walls, the groins, everything needs to be looked after. So they've got them all in here. Each one of these represents a separate item. And you can click on them and show what happens before maintenance and after maintenance, before you painted it this year and after you painted this year. So it's basically a record of what you've done. And anyone who's working in councils know you need to be able to show that you're doing due diligence, you're behaving in a way that is likely to look after people. Here's the asset register showing you how we want to clean up the place, remove unwanted signs and so forth. And you can do a picture of the sign and show so everyone knows what you're talking about when you're making a presentation to the council. Where do we keep the salt bins? How full is the salt bin? How often is it going to be replenished by the local council? All that sort of information can be stored in Parish Online and then readily available to anyone who needs to know. And we will talk about putting information up for public access so that not only the people on the council, but everybody can find out these informations if they want to. So cemetery management has been a bit of an eye-opener. It was largely became a topic of COVID. When it first came up, the government suddenly had a heart attack and said, do we have anywhere to put all the bodies that we may well be ending up with? And they were able to go out to all the users of Parish Online and say, how many spare allotments have you got? How many spare plots? And the answer came back, basically plenty. But Parish Online was a major feature in giving them their answers. And then all the own stuff when you're doing planning applications, which is obviously a major part of council life. You can consider things that tend not to be taken into account by bringing in the extra layers. So if someone says, I want to build a house here or make a change, and you say, well, yes, but is it in a conservation area? Is it in a site of special scientific interest? Is the place going to flood on a regular basis? All these sorts of information can be shown to the council that you're talking to that's going to make a decision. And here is an example of the planning applications being put onto a public website so that everybody can see what's going on. Another story in Somerset is a tourist sort of village, and they've incorporated outputs from Parish Online into their information brochures, so that it's a bit like you're doing with the neighbourhood plan, Richard, that you'll be able to publish the maps in your neighbourhood plan. And I will send you, there is Martock in Somerset has recently done their neighbourhood plan. They very kindly offered to make it available to anyone who wants to see it. So if it would help you to have a copy of a finished neighbourhood plan, I can certainly send you that.
Yeah, that sounds very very interesting. I would like to see that.
Okay, happy. I'll let me do that. Let me just make a note. Here we have the case studies page from the Parish Online website. They've broken them down into various types, so you can sort of narrow down the ones you want to look for, or I'm on the Show All tab, and basically each one of these is a case study from a village or council that has used Parish Online to achieve a certain end. And as I said, they give you the step-by-steps of how they got there, which was really, really useful. This one here, the Long Sutton Village Shop, is a particularly brilliant case study because I wrote it. All right, let's go into the basics of how the system is going to work. So Parish Online is a standard geographical information system, which means it uses exactly the same formats and procedures as any other of the big systems that the councils use around the country. In other words, it's completely compatible with what anybody else is going to be using, providing they're following the standard formats, which they all will be. In order to understand how the layers work, some of you may remember, well, possibly not, the old days of overhead projectors. When you wanted to show people what was happening, you would put a translucent layer of plastic on the projector and it would put it up on the board, and then you could take out your felt tip pen, you can make marks on the plastic and they would show up, and then you could put another overlay of a different layer of plastic on top and you change the picture. And that's exactly what we're doing digitally. So it's all about layers, and we're now going to go into layers. So on the picture on your right here, you've got the basic map, and we've got the land registry plots turned on. So these black outlines with the numbers are all what's in the land registry. And then you can say, well, if we overlay with layers from DEFRA, Historic England, and so forth, you can choose to present the best picture that covers what it is you're discussing. And you can have any number of layers turned on at once. So there's no limit except the straightforward ability of the human brain to absorb all the information that gets thrown up there. So having several layers on at once is perfectly normal, perfectly standard, and it's an ideal way of demonstrating things. And you can, as I said, you can turn them on or off as you wish. Lots of the layers would come up this location-based data answer I had before. Any one of those green dots is a source of information. So you click on the green dot and the information will pop up on the screen. And the same thing is going to be happening when we do this later for real. And here we are, you sort of setting up your own layers, helping to make decisions. So there are 3 types of layers, and each layer is a different geographical source of information. So you can have points, which are things like bus stations, lampposts, anything that you can decide as a point. You can have lines, which would be boundaries to fields or the new area where you're going to build a space, or a footpath, something like that, or basically polygons, which is everything else. And each layer can only have one of those geographical types. So if you are going to be showing footpaths going across parish-owned fields or something like that, you're going to need 2 layers, one for the lines and one for the points. So great tips. If you've not done this before, do please use a map. The trackpads work, but it's a lot faster and easier with the mouse. Stick with the main browsers, and by all means do not use Internet Explorer any longer, and try and make up as much space as you can get on your screen for your map. So when you log in, what you see is this system here. Basically, the system always starts up with your council area, your parish, in the middle. So I used to be, until recently, in Long Sutton in Somerset. And so all these examples will start off with being in Long Sutton. And what you've got here is the highest level of data that the Ordnance Survey puts out. So this is a really, really good map. You're not limited to your local council. You can go anywhere in the country, and we'll show you doing that in a second or two. But you can put data anywhere in the country, and only you will see it. So if you happen to have a grandmother living up in North Yorkshire and you want to do something with her house and add something to it on the map, you can do that, and nobody else will be able to see it except you. So on the left side here, you have a column that changes data depending on what you're doing at the time. So what we've got here are the collections of the layers that you see here. And each of these collections has a little down arrow, and we'll open up and show you all the layers that are grouped underneath. Those of you who've used Google Maps or anything like that, you can zoom in or out with your plus or minus button, or just by scrolling on the mouse. And you can scroll left or right, up or down in all the usual fashion. I'm sure that you're all effective with that. So you can see here that the only layers that are turned on is the one with the circle around it, and that's basically the choice of map that we've got. And again, we'll cover that in more detail later. So I just give a couple of slides now to show you the scale that you can zoom from using the Ordnance Survey's digital map. So here is the whole UK on the largest scale, or the smallest, depending on which way you're thinking, but basically the least amount of information per inch of map. Or sorry, that's showing my age, isn't it? Per meter of map, if you wish. As you come in one layer of scrolling, you get down to a sort of the council layer, and this is mostly, I'm sorry, the county layer. So this is most of Somerset being shown, and you've got a scale down here in the bottom left corner, which is showing you that this distance here represents 10 kilometers. And then keep an eye on that scale as we move down the line. So next one in is sort of local parish level. And you're seeing now that you're beginning to get much more data into the map. So individual roads are named rather than just numbered. You're beginning to see areas named. And certainly you're getting more and more details on houses. Again, with some of them named where there's space to put the writing. And then as you get down into the next level, and now here we are where this distance here represents 100 meters, you're now beginning to see the names of nearly every house popping up. So basically, as you zoom in or out, the level of detail that you're seeing changes, and the map will demonstrate, or rather show, what it's got, where there's space to present it. So you're not seeing the names of every single individual house here, but if you zoom in further, you would do. The data is there, but it's what's the word? It's organized so that you don't see it unless there's room to display it. So going down a bit further, we're now down to the 20 meters to this level here, and you can start seeing individual paths and the way that the grass sectors are laid out and so forth. And we can go down another level to, you've now got 200 millimeters in this gap. And so you're almost looking individual bricks of the house, just to show you the sort of data level you can go down to should you need to. I don't think any council ever needs to go to that sort of level, but it is possible. All right, keep on talking about these layers. Here we go back to the major starting screen, and this column on the left at the moment is all about the layers. So the green ones are basically the information that you can put down at the base level. So the Ordnance Survey PSGA is the one we tend to be going into most of the time, just to set the level of the map detail. And then you've got the aerial photography stuff to go on the top. And then the beige layers are the collections of layers that you can overlay on top. And we'll see all that showing. If I click on the green PSGA layer here, you'll notice it's opened up and shows you three choices. We've gone for the premium SAC, which has got the tick mark on it. And you just toggle on or toggle off by clicking on a layer. So if you want to change to one of these other ones, you just click on it. So here you can now see that the map has changed in the level of color you've got because we've clicked on the grayscale. And we're now clicking on that again to turn this one off and to turn that one on. And we've also gone up and clicked on the aerial photography. So you've now got a weird sort of combination here of both the map and the photographs. And that's not particularly clear when you see it for the first time. So I'm going to change that and say, if you right click on this layer here, you can bring up this toolbar, which is a slider of how much transparency there is on the map itself. So the default when you're putting on several layers at once is 60%, but you can change the slider. If I move it all the way to the right, to the left, you get 100% photography only, and uses the overhead photography of the entire country that you can choose to go through here. And the photograph will move with the map. So if you now scroll left or right, or you zoom in or out, then the photograph changes accordingly. And then if we go, if you toggle off the map, here, the photo layer here, then you just go straight back to the normal map. I've put this slide in here because occasionally there's one small glitch in the system where, particularly if you've been using photography, you get this blank map showing up. And that the question is, what do you do about it? And all you need to do is to click on the refresh button up here, this little circle, and the whole system goes back to where it should be. I just throw it in here because in case it happens to you, you'll know that the way out is very simple. All right, now we're going to start throwing in some additional layers just so you can show how they work. And because there are hundreds of them, there is a search feature to help you narrow them down. So let's just say we want to see what happens if you have a lot of rain and you get flooding. Now, just a warning, this part of Somerset that I was living in is what's known as the Somerset levels. It's basically at or below sea level, so very prone to flooding. So you're going to see lots of water. But basically, if we go up to the search magnifying glass up here, and we click on that and type in the word flood, then the system narrows down to these three collections of layers, which will all have anything to do with flood. So if I now click on the little arrow on the environment agency, it comes up with all sorts of choices. And just for drama, I'm going to select zone 3. And you can see all of a sudden water appears everywhere. So you can see how this is really useful for people who've sort of thrown in a planning application for you. And the first thing you do is turn on the flood layer to see that their house is not going underwater for 3 months of every year. Again, you turn the layer off just by toggling on it. And you can turn off the search button just by clicking on its X up here. So I'm going to do both of those. All right. The whole point of Parish Online really is to help you present information in a way that makes it more easily understood. So here we've got a layer of trees given to us by the tree charter. And the tree charter says you can have 50 trees for free, but we would like to know where you've put them and what you've done with them. And you basically need to track them as they go through life. So we set up a layer of the trees. It shows up here as red. And all I'm going to do is click on the red layer. And up comes the left-hand column now, you'll see has changed to the data record for this particular point. So basically, who's the landowner, where is it, when did you put the trees in? And these are all information that we decided to add. And again, we'll show you there. And please note that there are 5 attachments here. Attachments are anything. You can add anything to a record in Parish Online. So it can be a Word document, it can be a spreadsheet, it can be a photograph, it can be anything that's a record of what you want to do or record. Really helpful feature. So I'm just going to show you how it works here. So if I click on the plus sign, I'll get the 5 photographs that we took at the time when we planted the trees. And if I bring up any one of them, you can see that each tree came with its own little stake to hold it upright, a little polythene tube to stop it being eaten by everything else. And in case you didn't believe me when I said that Somerset disappears underwater, here's the water as proof. So each of these is against the 50 trees that we were given. And then once a year, we take another photograph of them. And as they grow, they get transplanted. And we click on new locations for each tree so that we can show you where they are. And in 50 years' time, when everyone's forgotten how the trees are doing, someone may suddenly look through their archive files in the National Tree Charter and say, oh, I wonder what happened to the trees in Long Sutton. And Long Sutton is diligently keeping track of them for you. So now it's your turn. Sorry, I was looking really to explain where you're going to add information. So all of the layers that you get from third parties are their data. You can't touch them. You can certainly see them. You can use them. You can bring them in or out as you want them, but you can't change them because it's not your data. So where you go to put your data is in what's called the parish layers. And so the first brown collection that comes up is always the parish layer. And what's under there could be nothing to start with, because no one's done anything yet. There may be layers, there may not be. And you're going to add information under a parish layer. There is a slightly special case in the asset register, which I mentioned towards the end of the presentation. So when you say I'm going to add a new layer, you need to think about what the layer is going to be for and therefore what data it needs to contain. And you determine this because it's your layer. So we're now going to do this yourself. We're going to give you access to your system. I hope that you're both quite happy to jump from my screen where you're sort of watching what I'm suggesting you do to your screen, which is where you're in Parish Online and actually have to do it. So I hope that you're quite happy if jumping between one window and the next. Let me know if you're not. But you need to be ready to go in a second. So what we're going to do is say in our layer, we need a title. You must have a title. So I'm just suggesting for today, use the title as your name and then the word test, because it makes it much easier to find the record and delete it later. You're going to choose one of the 3 types of geometry. I'm suggesting for today that you choose a polygon, but it's entirely up to you, but you're going to need to choose one of them. Descriptions, we'll get into why they're useful, but you can just put in any words if you like in descriptions. And you're going to need to lead at least one column of data. I'm going to suggest you use 3. For today's example, the 3 will be name, date, and status. The name column will be of type text. The date obviously will be a date. And the status column will be a mixed, which is text, but with allowed values. And we're going to have 3 allowed values, not yet started, under construction, and finished. And again, you'll be able to see why we're doing this as we go through it. So if you're now switching to your copy of Parish Online, you need to go along the top menu where there's a Create button. Click on that, and you're going to click on the New Layer choice. So if there isn't a Create button, let me know. And if there isn't a New Layer choice, let me know. But otherwise, you should both be clicked now on New Layer. And the first thing it says is enter a title.
Quick question: How do I minimize your screen to get my screen, my map up?
You should be able to tab from one to the other. So if you do Alt Tab on your keyboard, it should just bounce you from one to the other. Does that work for you?
I'm on Apple.
Okay, so it'll be Command Tab for you.
Okay.
Is it working?
Yes, and I had it open initially before we came online, and it's now disappeared.
Well, if you go into your browser.
Let me just go back and get online again on my Mac. Okay, I'm back again.
You're all set? Okay.
Yeah.
And are you on Create New Layer?
Yep.
Okay, so on your screen, you should have a pop-up box which is entitled Create a New Layer, and it says Enter a Layer Title.
Yep.
Now, this title, I'm just suggesting you should make it. In my case, I've written Graham Test. You can write Richard Test or whatever. But bear in mind that this title is what is going to go into the left-hand column. So it needs to be short enough to fit into the left-hand column. And it hopefully will remind you what it's for, but the next step will show you why this exists. So once you've got a title in there, then just click on Next. And you now get asked which geometry type you want to choose. Use a little drop-down arrow to choose one of point, line, or polygon. For today's example, I've gone for polygon. And then it says, set your layers description optional. And the reason that this is here is that in 2 years' time, or when some new member wants to get involved with Parish Online, they got no idea from what you've put down in the title, what this particular layer is going to be doing. And remember, they've got hundreds to choose from. So they want to know, what does this layer do? This is where you put it in as a description. So again, for today, you don't really need it, but it's something to bear in mind when you're creating layers formally. Bear in mind that you've got other people coming along to use the system. They may not have any idea what Fred's test case means unless you've explained it. So that's what the point of the layer description is. When you've done that and you're ready, click on Next. And it's going to ask you to add columns of data. Now, you will recall that we're going to have 3 columns today: name, date, and status. And to add a new column, you click on the plus button at the top of the right-hand side. So just click on plus, and it'll automatically come up with a column called name of type text, and allowed values is blank. Well, add plus it says, but you ignore that. So that's fine. That's what we wanted. So now you're ready for the second one. Go back to the plus sign on the top right and click again, and it'll come up again with another line called name, but a message that says you can't have 2 fields called name. They've got to be different. So you're going to put your mouse over the name on the second layer there and just change it to read date. And when you've got that, then you move to the middle column and change the text to read a date as well. It's just a drop-down list. And when you're ready, click on the plus sign to the top right again and add the third layer. Same issue, you need to change the name to status. You can leave the the type as text. But today, for this one, we're going to add in a couple of allowed values. So rather than clicking on the plus at the top right, would you please click on the add plus on the status layer? And it says add a value. So we agreed at the start of this that there are going to be 3 values here. The first one is just not yet started. So you can type in not yet started by the equal sign. And then when that's in place, click on the add at the top right and add a second value, which can be under construction, and do it again on add and add the third value of finished. And when you're happy with that, click on confirm. So you should end up with 3 allowed layers of not yet started, under construction, and finished. And those, you've now got 3 layers: name, date, and status. The status one should throw 3 items in the allowed values field, and that is what we need to do. So you're all happy with that, click on finish. This is a point that I mentioned to everybody, that Parish Online is hugely forgiving. It's a really, really simple system to use. So you can edit later and get out any messes that you've made, or much more importantly, you don't need to get it perfect the first time. If you start using the system and then said, oh, actually, we need another column of data in here, it's a piece of cake to go back in and just add the extra column. So it's a very rough and ready system, if you like, in terms of you don't have to get it perfect from the start. You can come back and amend it later if you decide that you need some more. Right, so having clicked on finish or confirm, whatever it was, you should be now back at the main map and nothing appears to have changed. But if you click on the parish layers, that first brown layer, you should see your new layer that you've created there. If there were parish layers there before, it'll add yours to the bottom. So it's possible you'll need to scroll down to find it if you have got lots of layers already in the parish layer, but if you haven't, you should have found your one that's called test. Anyone got any problems with that so far?
No, it's all worked.
Perfect. Robert, how are you doing?
Yeah, that's all worked so far.
Okay. Right. Now, what we're going to do next is change one of the columns, the data that you just added, to be a required column. And the reason for that is very, very straightforward. That when people are adding new points, new features into Parish Online, they often forget to fill in the data columns. And that means that there's actually no way of finding it in the future, because you can't search for it because it hasn't got a name. No one gave it a name. They didn't call it anything. So what we're going to do is to make one of your columns required, which means that they can't add a feature until they've filled in at least one of the columns. So go up to the top right, if you would, of your screen where there's a little cogwheel. Click on that till you get a drop-down list and select administration. So if you're back on my page, you can see it, but if you're staying on your own, then just click on administration. And it'll appear to be roughly a blank screen for a second or two until the middle column fills up with your layers, because you're downloading the data from the cloud. So it may take just a couple of seconds, but you should be able to see your own test layer. Again, it adds them to the bottom. So if you've got lots of layers already there, you may need to scroll down to find yours. But when you go down, all I want you to do is just click on it once to highlight it. And then the third column on the right will have changed, and you'll see it's called layer details. And it's the layer details of your layer that you've highlighted. So you've got 2 tabs there, one called general and one called columns. If you click on the columns tab, you'll see that the system has already filled in the first 2 columns of data for you. The search and the query columns have all got ticks in them, but the required public and link columns are all empty. So what I want you to do, please, is to just click on the required column for the name layer. So click on it once will just put a tick in it, and you'll end up with it looking like, if you come back to my screen, there's just 3 columns with it. Now you've got a required tick in the name column. And you should see that above it to the right is a highlighted yellow save button. Please click on that. The system will tell you it's saved successfully after it's asked you if you're sure you want to save. So you say yes, and then you'll get a little pop-up screen saying layers saved, which will disappear after about 3 seconds. So you need to be quick to watch it. Occasionally that green layer doesn't show up, the green pop-up, you get a red one saying something happened that prevented you from saving it properly. That's usually just a connection an issue, a connectivity to the cloud. If you do it again, I've never known it not go away. So we've now got our columns of layers complete. We've got a required field in there. Let's go back to the maps. So up in the top right, you've got 3 icons. There's a middle one that looks like a globe. Click on that. That takes you back to the maps. So on my screen now, if you were to revert to that, I've just got a slide that says, where are we? So we've created a new layer, which we called Richard Test or Robert Test, hopefully. We've created the 3 necessary columns in the layer. That was name, status, and name, date, and status. We changed the status column to create drop-down boxes with 3 allowed values, not yet started, under construction, and finished. And we configured the name column as a required data. So all you've done now is basically put the infrastructure in place into the system, but we haven't got any data in that new layer. So you've created the layer, now you need to add some features to it. So if we go back into Parish Online, go down to your to your test layer and right click on it. Right click anywhere in that test layer and you'll pop up a mini menu. And there's a second choice down is called Add Feature. Just click on that. And it will bring up in the left-hand side, those 3 columns that you've created. And you'll see at the top, it says under select a layer, it should have your name and test so that you're in the right place. And hopefully the name field is all surrounded in red, which means it's required. And you'll see that the save button down in the bottom left corner is grayed out. So it cannot do anything until you fill in at least the name column. So please go ahead and put in something name. Again, I would just put in whatever you're going to do and call it test. What we're going to do on my side, for the example, I'm going to draw a new cricket pavilion. So you might say pavilion test or something like that, but you don't have to draw a pavilion. It might be anything you like. You can leave the date blank, or you can fill it in if you wish, just to see how it works. And ditto with the status. I would select, you'll see the drop down of the 3 choices you put in, not yet started, under construction, and finished. Choose one of them, doesn't matter which.
I've got lost.
Okay. What's on your screen at the moment, Richard?
I'm just, sorry, let me scroll, just go back again. I've just at my map, and my new layer, Richard Test, has disappeared.
Has it?
Yeah.
How very sad. You're in the parish layers.
I'm in parish. No, parish layers has disappeared.
It was there before.
It was there before, and then if you click on the little arrow, it went down to Richard Test.
Right. And now you can't even find parish layers to click on.
I cannot find parish layers.
Okay. So the way around that is to go back up to the cogwheel in the top right, Richard, and click on administration.
Yep.
And then let's see what happens to your layers. Does your test layer show up in the layers?
Ah, it's just come up.
Okay, good. And
Yep,
were you successful in getting the required column put in place?
I believe I was. Yes, I was.
Okay, so if you now click on the icon that says go back to maps, the global icon, top right.
Spinning
Do you
wheel.
have your parish layers returned?
Yeah, I've now got it back.
Hey, good. So go into your test layer and right click on it and it'll come up and say add feature.
I get a button if I right click on my mouse saying toggle all layers.
Oh, sorry, you're into, you need to go into your parish layers and do the right click on your test layer.
I've got add feature style
go.
table view.
Yep, good. So just click on add feature.
Got it. Now I've got it in red.
Perfect. And you'll see that the save button is grayed out.
Yep.
Go ahead and stick in a name, anything you like. Use the date column and use the status column just so you can see how they work. And then you'll notice that the save button is still grayed out because although you put the data in, you haven't actually put the feature on the map anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So because we're going to add for this test exercise, let's say a building of some sort, if you chose polygon, you need to find an open space in which to put it. So on my slide, or rather on my map, I've moved to an open space, which is our recreation area, where there's room to put a map. So you need to find somewhere on your map where you can scroll to and zoom in or out. So there's just space to add this new building. It doesn't matter where it is. It can be any field, anywhere you like. But you just need to say, where am I going to put this new feature? So if you happen to be looking at my screen, I've switched to the recreation ground where there's lots of space to add a new feature. But when you're ready to put your new pavilion in somewhere, then you'll see that the crosshairs on your mouse cursor, or rather your mouse cursor has become a crosshairs. And what you're going to do is to click once at, let's say, the top left corner of your building. And then if you just drag the mouse, you'll see a blue line follows it. So create one wall and click again, and you can change direction, say usually right angles, and go down and create all 3 walls. Each time you want to change direction, just click once on the mouse. And when you got back to the finish point, double click. And what you should do is have a red outline of your building. Then you'll notice that down the bottom.
Mine is blue.
Sorry, it should, I beg your pardon. Yes, I was ahead of myself. You're quite right. It is blue.
Okay, good.
So I got mine blue now. You'll notice that the save button down the bottom left corner is now fully available. It should be deep black. So go ahead and click on save, please. And then your blue building should have changed to red.
It has.
Brilliant. Okay. So the system automatically thinks that you're going to add a whole bunch of features. So having added one building, the left-hand data column is now changed to a blank record ready for the next one. Now, we're not going to do that today. We're just going to work on the one that we've done. So click on the X to the right of the word feature editor at the top of the left-hand column. And you should go back now to the parish layers with your layer showing with a tick mark in it and your red building somewhere in the middle of the map. Success?
Yep.
All right. So now we're going to just check what the data is on your building, and we may need to edit it. So the way we do that is to click anywhere in the red part, and your column should change on the left-hand side to the data record that you're beginning to recognize now for your building. And at the top of the data record, there are some icons. This is where, if you want to edit anything, you click on the pencil. If you want to delete the record, you click on the dustbin. Filtering we'll get into later, and the 3 dots we'll get into later. But right for now, I want you to get used to the idea of making changes. So would you please click on the pencil button? You could change any of the name, date, or status, should you wish to. We don't particularly wish to now, unless you're keen to do so. What we want to do is to change your building. So if you move your mouse to any part of the blue surround around the red part and click, you'll notice that you can pull it. So I would like you to try changing the shape of your building. If you went with a straightforward, boring old square, then try changing it to a triangle, or in the case of my diagram, I've got a sort of an E shape. But just to get the hang of moving the the details that you've worked on. So if you were working on quite a high scale when you started doing the building, you can zoom in and make it a lot bigger, because things are much easier to edit when they're large. So you get a much finer control of the detail if you zoom in. And when you're ready, you've made a change, you're all happy with it, click on save. So we're all happy with that?
Yep.
All right, the next thing is that we want to, having clicked on save, you can now click on the red thing again, and you'll see that the left-hand column now has the word attachments in it, which wasn't there before. So you can now add an attachment to your record. And for the exercise, please go ahead and add an attachment and add anything you've got sitting on your computer to this particular record. It can be a spreadsheet, it can be a photograph of your grandmother, whatever you like, your favorite car. Just for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to add any old attachment. And you may find that it takes a few seconds to actually add it. This is because it's taking your data and moving it from your computer up into the cloud. So it's not instantaneous. It may take a second or two. So don't feel that nothing's happening. It's just happening slowly. And then you should end up with now an attachment showing on your data record. And if you want to see what it looks like, click on the green arrow and you can see whatever the attachment was that you added. Okay.
Yep.
So just to say that for the exercise at the moment, we've finished your first exercise. What you did was to add a layer, which basically says, in this layer, I'm going to store this sort of information. And you had 3 columns, name, date, and status. And that created the infrastructure of the layer. But then to go ahead and put data into that layer, you added a feature, which in our case was our test pavilion. Note that once you've got the layer in place, you can add any number of features all over the country, if you will. But they fall under that particular column, which you called, or sorry, the layer you called Richard's test layer or Robert's test layer. You can put any number of features in there. I mention that in passing because sometimes people have created a new layer for each new feature that they want because I haven't made it clear. So I'm just emphasizing here. Once you've got the infrastructure in place, you can add any number of features to it. If you wanted to add a point or a line, you would need a different layer for each of that. So, but you then put all 3 together and show them all at once if you wish to. All right, now if you come back to my screen, I've got a slide up that just describes the asset register because that's worthy of mention. The asset register is a mix of a layer provided for you and your own parish layers. So the difference is that the asset register is a structured database that's already been created for you, but it's empty. There's no data in there, but the database is all there. So the layer has been created, if you will, on your behalf. It differs from your parish layers because you cannot change that infrastructure because the asset register is the same for every council across the country that's using Parish Online, which, by the way, is about 1,800 of them so far. So to make sure that everybody has the same data, you cannot change the infrastructure of the layers. What you can change is the data itself. And you go ahead and you'll see that the asset register is all set up in advance for all the things that typically councils need to store. So there'll be building information, there'll be building contents, there'll be all the stuff you've got around the parish, like street lamps and benches and footpaths. They're all in there. There's an insistence on value because this is very much for insurance purposes that you will need to be asked what the current value of the building is and what the replacement value is, because the insurance companies are telling me now that they more or less replace everything rather than repair it. So they're expecting claims to be for the replacement of the village hall, because the fire department says unless there's life involved, they won't even endanger themselves by putting out a village hall fire. They'll just let it burn until it's gone. Because we're all into health and safety nowadays, and human life is, we're becoming to value that more. There's no point in saving anything in the village hall, just let it burn down, because you've properly insured it, haven't you? So replacement value is a key feature in the asset register. So basically anything that your council is responsible for ought to be in the asset register. It's quite a complicated, that's not the right word. There's quite a lot involved with the asset register. So there's a completely separate training session that I do on it, but I just mentioned it here so that you're familiar with it, because it's different from everything else. It's a third-party layer in which you put the data, which is unusual, and it's a parish layer into which you put the data, but you can't control the infrastructure. So it's a bit of a mixed match. Okay, my last slide is to say that all the way across the top of Parish Online, there are menu headings. You've clicked on create, but there's print and there's tools and there's a whole bunch of others. They all have essential acts to follow, and the knowledge base built into Parish Online, which is the top right cogwheel. Second choice down is help and support. You can find almost anything you like in there. Just type what you're interested in the search button and it'll pop up. So if you want to know how to use the create menu or the tools menu, just type that into the knowledge base and it'll come up and tell you. Q&A session, I'm wide open to discussions for you. I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other. Usually I tell people that the most useful thing for you, besides the knowledge base itself, is the banter session that the user group holds every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. So basically, this is a group of the usual suspects who get together because they are parish clerks, they're councillors, but they're all very familiar with Parish Online. And they set up an hour each week for anyone to just come in and say, how do I do this? Or could you help me with that? And it's a drop-in session. You just pop in, ask your question, get the answer, and pop out again. Or if you're absolutely fascinated, you can stay and watch what everyone else is doing. But it's a great way of not getting stuck on something. You can just come in there. In the email I'll send you, I'll show you how to register for these sessions if you want to, and how you can get future training and anything else. But in the meantime, I've done a lot of talking. Does anyone want to have any questions answered?
I've got a quick question, Graham.
Okay.
If you've got a lot of layers selected, obviously got them open and whatnot, is there a quick way to deselect every single layer other than the base map, or do you have to go through every single one individually?
It's a great question, and if you've got the columns up on the left-hand side listing all the layers, you'll notice that the starting point is the collections. So what you see is the parish layers is a collection, asset register is a collection, and all the others are collections. You can toggle everything on or off at that level. So if you click on the mini map, on the mini arrow, you'll open up the layers. But if you right click on the collection level, it will select or deselect everyone underneath it. So the answer to your question is yes, there is a quick way, and it's to right click in the collection level. So rather than the opening individual individual layers, you can click on the collection level itself, and that will turn off or turn on everything underneath it. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
Good. All right. So Richard, looks like you're about to poised to ask me the life thing. What is the reason for life? Yes.
Yeah, well, that's I'm about at that point. So I'm the person who set up the Parish Online for the parish for the neighbourhood plan.
Right.
So I've had all the access details, But can I pass those on to other people who might also want to help?
Absolutely. Your license allows you to have any number of users of councillors. That's automatic.
Okay.
And you just create a new user by going into the administration and add user.
Right.
Which we'll get into if you are able to attend the next training session. But there's also the, what's the word I'm looking for? You've got to meet the requirements of the Ordnance Survey license, which says that councillors automatically are entitled to their own account. But you can also say, if you've got a group of people who are working in the community interest and the parish council decides it's in the best interest of the community to enable them to store their data in the system, then away you go. So if you've got a group of nature lovers or tree huggers or anything else who are doing things that by which the community benefits, then you just have a regular council meeting, you bring it up on the minutes and say, we consider the requirements of the bird watching people, and they are helping us out by protecting the local community, whatever it is. So you give them access. So basically you can have any number of people who have access to the system, but unless they're councillors, you need to have a formal record of having put the system up for vote. Do we lead the sort of the Toad Watching Society? Are they producing a communal service? Because if they are, then they have access to Parish Online.
Okay,
you therefore met the requirements of the licensing people.
So that's my status, because I am not a parish councillor, but I am
You're performing it, yes,
approved by the parish to
there you go.
be the relevant person, and I am also thinking about tree huggers who also want to map trees.
Well, they all have their place, and they're all protected. I mean, I think that
actually, you mentioned about looking at shadows on the aerial photograph.
Yep.
And they've actually started using that, because I did make a print of a stretch of road, and they wanted to know where the trees were to define whether they were, and put a note about each one. And of course, the shadows of the trees were there on the roadside, so they were actually able to identify individual trees and say, this one's got ash dieback and he's going to be dead, you know,
yeah,
without formally making an asset register.
Right.
It's a handwritten thing, but it did help them significantly.
Good. Well, I will send you, Richard, that Martok neighborhood plan so you can see what they did. And I'll also send you the email address of the person that wrote it, because he's in your position of not being a councillor, not being a clerk, but being the person that, and he's very willing to help out anybody who's putting together a neighborhood plan. So I'll just give you that information.
That would be very helpful information.
He's a nice guy, amazingly, yes. Robert, you're all set?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. That's I felt really useful training session. So
good. Well, I'm going to see you for the next one, aren't I? So 102, which goes into much more depth on each layer and creation that you're doing. You'll end up an expert in no time.
Perfect. That's what I need to be.
Okay, good.
I'm trying to work out whether I want to sign up for 102 just yet, or I'm just going to digest it for a little bit and then come up.
What I find with Parish Online is that it's daunting to start with, but as soon as people have grasped the basics, then they're away. And I get lots of people doing 101 and 102, and very few going to the rest. So because the system is pretty intuitive. I mean, I spent 35 years in the IT industry, and Parish Online is still, in my opinion, a little gem that people don't know about. It's very powerful. It's very easy to use once you've got over the initial learning circle or learning curve. And you sort of keep coming up with new ideas for it. I mean, we've got literally hundreds of our own layers that we've created because people are finding it so useful. And it certainly brings the community together. I mean, it was COVID-19, it was a huge help in tying together those people who wanted to offer help and those people who were able to give it, or who needed it rather. And we then started, the footpath committee got involved, and they started putting in all the gates and the styles and the conditions of them and this sort of thing. And the farmers said not interested until we pointed out that actually they're required by law to be interested. and that changed their point of view, and all sorts of things. But basically, it can become a real everyday tool. And that's almost critical to its use. If you touch it once a month, then everything you learned last month, you've already forgotten by the time you come back. But if you're using it on a regular basis, it is fabulous.
I can, you know, having just dabbled with it and played, I mean, I've always just played with computer stuff. I'm a graphic designer, so I'm familiar with all the graphics applications. Okay, you start playing and you do realize the strength, and by and large it does seem amazingly simple, but I definitely benefited from your presentation this morning.
Okay, well, I'm very glad to hear that. Look forward to hearing from you again. Do please pop into the banter sessions on Friday. They can be very helpful. Oh, I should mention that up in the knowledge base, there's also what's called a community forum. And if you have an issue and you can find anybody who's online at the time, you can ask a question and they'll come back to you with an answer. It's quite often it is I who will answer, because I tend to I get notified every time someone pops a question into the forum. And if I'm available, I'll just pop up and see if I can answer it. But the idea being that there is a user base who are going to be online all the time. And if anyone has a question, the community forum is where you can pose it and get an answer. So that's built into the knowledge base. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Lovely to see you both. Thank you for taking the time to join me, and I hope it's been helpful.
It has.
Thank you very much, Graham.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.